Welcome, everyone, to Intuition Development number one. I am planning on possibly doing a second installment of that. We'll kind of see how this goes and if it needs some follow up or if there's other things that we want to teach around that. My name is Julie North. For those of you that are not familiar with me, I'm a medium and medical intuitive. I teach workshops and lectures. And we're now doing some free classes online. So all of the free classes are being recorded and are available on our YouTube channel. So you can watch any of the classes that you missed or rewatch classes. Feel free to share them with your friends. They're for anybody's use. It's more important to me that people have some opportunity to learn things or access to information than where they get it from. So feel free to do that. Keep in mind that I am not a doctor or medically trained. We're not really going to be talking about anything medical this evening, but always get anything health related checked out by your doctor. And you can find out more information about me on the website at www.julienorth.com. You can sign up for the mailing list so you can find out first about upcoming classes. This is the last class right now in the initial series of free classes that we put out. Next week is my birthday, and I'm taking the week off from night classes. So I'm still working through the week, but during that week, I'm probably going to come up with a few more classes to offer. So make sure you stay tuned for those. I appreciate you guys for tuning in on all the ones that we've done so far. Just keep your eye open for all those new classes that might be coming out. So let's talk a little bit about intuition. The thing I probably hear the most from people is, how do I get better connected? That's the sentence. How do I get better connected? And I think it's really important to start out by telling you that there is no way to get better connected, because that sentence implies that you're not already perfectly connected. What most people mean is, how do I become conscious of the connection that I already have? And that's a little bit of what we're going to be doing tonight, is giving you a tool that is very helpful in allowing you to get some input from outside of your conscious mind, so to speak. And there's people talk about intuition kind of as a blanket statement. And I want to just address a little bit about that. Intuition really kind of falls into any sense that someone gets, any piece of information that they get that is not coming from one of their Western taught five senses: sight, taste, smell, touch, those sorts of things, sound. It's often an impression in the mind's eye. It's a gut feeling. So, you can be a psychic, you can be a medium, and all mediums are psychics, but not all psychics are mediums, minor distinction. Psychics come in all kinds of ranges of what their capacities are. So do mediums. Mediums communicate with things, entities. Psychics don't necessarily do that. So I think it's psychics kind of a catch-all term, but there are definitely differences from a technical standpoint. Being empathic is a type of intuition. Getting little premonitions or premonition type dreams is a part of intuition. So there's all kinds of ways that this can come. And you're built really to be able to access that. And every human being sort of has a range of capacity in their system. And most people, I don't think I've ever seen anybody, including myself, that's actually operating at their ceiling, right? So if this is your range and you're operating here, there's always room for growth. And probably if you ever got all the way to the top, your system would adjust and there would be more room for growth, because growth is kind of a never-ending situation. So, how to get more in touch with that and utilize that for what you think you want to use it for. And for some of us, it comes spontaneously. And for others, it's something that they learned how to tune into and turn on. And the culture that most of us live in hasn't really taught you, probably hasn't taught you how to be in touch with that. You were taught to be entirely dependent upon your senses and your intellect. And anytime most children, when they express some level of intuition, it's either shut down immediately, or it's entertained for a little while, and then the parent is exhausted with that process, or doesn't have time for that, or doesn't know what to do with that, really, in most cases, and it goes, it kind of gets swept under the table, and we all learn to live in the world that is relevant to everyone else. And so, children are often very, very intuitive, but like anything, if it's not engaged with, if there's no connectivity to that in the outside world, it sort of atrophies, or we learn to shut it down. For most people around the age of 11, if you're born wired for intuition as part of your experience, or somewhere between 11 and 13, it often starts kicking back on. And that's an opportunity for a lot of people to consciously decide whether they're going to engage in that, or whether they're going to kind of turn it off on a more permanent level. Permanent being subjective, really, of course, in part based off of what your soul's agenda is, and in part being about whether or not you ever decide to turn it back on. So you don't have to work with intuition in a I'm assaulted every day, people are yelling at me type of way from the ethers. You can use it at will. And I've had a lot of people ask me to teach them how to be more intuitive. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I wouldn't teach it. And I think it's really important to talk to you about that for a minute. The reason I've never taught anyone how to access intuition at any real depth is ethics. And I'm not going to be able to teach it to you all in even this little easy tool if we don't talk about ethics. So ethics are subjective for most people. What's ethical for one person is not ethical for another, or they're situational for some people. And I really believe that most people see themselves as good people, as ethical people. That's kind of the nature of us. And, if we have a skill or ability, we often want to be kind and use that to help other people. And that is really where universal ethics come into play. So if you're going to work with intuition, it's really important that you understand universal ethics rather than your own personal ethics. And I can't teach it to you without teaching that. So if you've ever worked with me, or you've heard me teach a class or a lecture, you'll hear me use the term greatest good. And greatest good is a concept based off of what, if you're talking about a human's greatest good, what a human soul is after. What is serving their greatest good? You may want something, but it may not actually be serving your greatest good. So in the realm of potentials for a human experience, a soul comes to have a certain growth. And they might sign up for some relationship abandonment 101 and some midlife poverty 204. And, maybe they're going to heal people with their voice. It's kind of roughed out. Those are crude terms. But in whatever it is that they signed up for, there are endless possibilities. And this applies to you. Endless possibilities that can happen in your lifetime. And in all of the endless possibilities, there will be a tiny number of things that absolutely must happen in order for your soul to get the experience that it came here to get. On the opposite end of that spectrum will be a tiny number of things that if those things happened, this is the part that most people get tripped up on. If those things happened, they would so derail your soul's path that they're not allowed. So the guides step in and make sure that those tiny number of things don't happen. But that's really rare. Everything else, the vast majority of experiences here fall into the neutral category, which means they could happen to you or not happen to you or happen to another person or not happen to another person. And it will change the way that their life navigates or the options that are available to them or their emotions, but it isn't going to derail, it's not going to make or break their soul's intended goal. And most of us would like to think things like, oh, if I ever got super sick and became paralyzed, that would be against my greatest good. And so I'm sure my guides, my guardians, my angels, the universe, my God, whatever terms you use around any of that would prevent that from happening. You'd be surprised how much stuff you can learn, that you signed up for in that particular state. You could totally learn relationship abandonment, 101, midlife poverty, 204, and probably still heal people with your voice. You could get in a car accident and lose your arms and legs and still get what your soul was after. What happens to us as human beings is we get confused with what we like, what's love and light, what we want, what's convenient, what we want to manifest, as though that is the only thing that can serve our greatest good. And it's simply not true. So the guides are going to make sure that they're going to keep presenting you opportunities for this tiny number of things that you must get. And they're going to prevent these tiny number of things that, if they happen through random free will choices and opportunistic situations, they're going to prevent those. So this little thing down here is how people will wreck their car and roll it into the size of a pop can and come out without a scratch. Or they'll have a vision of someone dragging them from that vehicle, but there's nobody around. It's guide intervention in those cases. And it could be something serious like that, or it could be something, where you just feel like you're called to go right instead of left, and you may never know what you avoided as a result of that. And that's, some of your intuition, sometimes it's divine intervention. That's them determining that, because the guides work for your soul. But it is inappropriate for us as human beings to determine what is in someone else's greatest good. And you're probably thinking, oh, I don't do that, but we do. We do it all the time. When we help someone, we are often determining that what they need is that help. So I'll tell you a little story. When I was young, there weren't very many TV stations. And my dad would watch TV in the evening. And back in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, it became a big deal for there to be commercials out with starving children in Africa. And you could send pennies a day and, help feed these starving children. And we were just kids. But my dad asked a very poignant question, and it applies very well to what the guides say about ethics. He said, how do you know you're helping those people? Now, I don't remember the rest of the conversation, but basically the premise was exactly what we're talking about here. How do you know that if you send money to people that are starving, that is actually help, that's in their greatest good? You can't know that, right? In many cases, our helping someone actually sets them backwards. And I'm not trying to dissuade you from the compassionate feeling of helping or for assisting. There's a reason for talking about all of this, because it's the difference between your own perception of what's ethical and what's universally true for what's ethical, and why you need to know this. So, I would encourage all of you to check in with the self always about whether something feels resonant with you. And if you're not familiar how to do that, we did a class on that last week. It's on the YouTube channel. Definitely want to go check that out. And the tool that we're using tonight plays similarly with the tool we taught last week. So it's very helpful around that. And I encourage you to make free will choices that are resonant for you in that regard. But I'm also going to encourage you to try to language your service to yourself or to others from if it's in their greatest good standpoint. So let me make another example out of this. Let's say you know a person who, is going through a really tough time. And over a period of time, financially, it's been more and more and more challenging for them. And it's just getting harder. And they get it a little bit together, according, for their perspective. And then someone helps them out, but it doesn't really help them. And then they repeat. It looks like they're helped. And then all of a sudden they're repeating this lesson again. And this problem is building and building and building. And someone else comes in and helps. And it looks like they're helping. And they're grateful. And the other person feels good. And everybody's happy. We're doing the right thing. We're being a kind person. And if you step back from your own human experience and your own wants and interests there for a minute and looked at it from an outside perspective, if the person that's struggling is trying to learn something and the struggle is the process, and they're intended to struggle until they get it and make some change or have some epiphany or reach a certain level of difficult experience. And then it's over. They've either learned or it's check marked. But if someone persistently steps in and fixes it for them, helps them, you often take away the stress or the experience that they were intending to have, and everybody feels good, and the cycle starts all over again. So what you think is helpful can be detrimental. And it's crucially important to keep that in mind. I'm imploring you to keep that in mind. When someone we love is ill or sick or in pain, we will often do things like pray for their healing. That's a beautiful thing. You don't know if they want that. You don't know if they need that. Their mouth is saying that, or maybe they can't speak right now. It's a beautiful thing to want to help someone. It's a lovely thing to want them to heal, but you have no idea if that's what their soul is actually after. And I'm not telling you not to pray for their healing or send them love and light or solutions, whatever it is that feels resonant for you. What I'm telling you is that you need to qualify your giving with if it's in their greatest good. So let me make a couple of examples out of that, and then I want to move on to our to how to ask questions. So if someone is ill and they say, pray for me, and you want to pray for them, absolutely pray for them. You pray for the best thing that you could ever pray for is that someone get what is in their greatest good as gently as possible. And I learned that little qualification of gently, as gentle as possible, the hard way. I got in a little bit of a habit of saying that I was dense and that, the other side was, I wasn't listening, and that I was making a joke out of it. They had to hit me upside of the head with a 2x4 in order to get my attention. And that's exactly what they did. They oddly knocked a 2x4 that was leaned up against a tree and literally hit me in the head and knocked me out for a second. And I went, okay, I will stop saying that, right? So I don't have to, and you don't have to get what's in your greatest good just any old way, right? You got this whole batch of neutral things that can happen to you that aren't required, and they aren't forbidden, so to speak. They're neutral. Some of them you're going to like. They'll be fine. They'll be fun, maybe. Some of them are going to be awful, right? So if you just leave it open, whatever's in my greatest good, right, then there's no qualification for that. If you say what's in my greatest good, I want to get what's in my greatest good as gently as possible, the priority in that statement is getting what's in my greatest good. The qualification for it is as gentle as is possible. We're not saying I want to get gentle messages and hopefully they're in our greatest good, right? The point is that you are getting information or assistance or, whatever it is that you need in your soul path's greatest good, and you'd like it to be as gentle as is possible, and still get that greatest good thing. And that's how you want to apply it to other people too. When we start getting more in touch with our intuition, and this little tool that I'll teach you can get you some clear answers, some really clear answers, actually. If you are applying this skill in ways that are infringing upon your greatest good or other people's greatest good, one, you might not get clear answers. You might just be absolutely getting in the way of the process itself. And two, you might be putting yourself in a position to learn a hard lesson about ethics, and the universe doesn't pull any punches where that's concerned. So somebody's going to learn a lesson around that. And I'm trying to help you avoid those unnecessary, painful lessons if possible. So try to remember to find a way to put into your processes, only that which is in my greatest good will happen for me, or only the information that's in my greatest good to know at this time will be what I get. And it doesn't mean you're going to like it. It doesn't mean another person's going to like it. If they're ill and you want to pray for them, I pray that they get what is in their greatest good as gently as possible. If it's possible for them to heal and it's in alignment with what their soul is after, I ask for that to be made available to them. In the realm of sending energy or healing energy to people, which I get asked to do pretty regularly, that is the stance that I have learned to take around that after the other side has kind of hemmed that in over a number of years. And a lot of times I don't send it directly to them. It's a little bit invasive to send love to someone or healing to someone. What I will do is I will send it into a space, if you're looking at it from a 3D standpoint, that they have access to, and they can access that if they want it. I send whatever's in their greatest good for them to utilize, but I don't force it on them, even if they say they want it, right? It's up to their soul to access that. It's not my place to put love and light into someone's field, to put healing. Is it possible to do? Absolutely, it's possible to do. Is it inappropriate? Definitely, right? So be very, very careful that your kind heart and your good intentions and your human concepts about what's good and what's right and what's helpful don't put you in a position to be operating unethically, unintentionally, right? We're not talking about people going out trying to control. Definitely, I'm not encouraging that either. But our greatest hurdle in this is when we think we're being kind, when we think we're being helpful. And sometimes the most ethical thing we can do is send them whatever's in their greatest good. And that might be that they suffer until they get the lesson that they need. And that's a very painful thing to be the person suffering. And it's a very painful thing to watch someone suffer or stand by why they suffer. But what you often don't realize is that when you keep resetting their process with helping, the suffering is extended, right? A lesson that could have taken them 2 months or a year is now going to be on repeat. Everybody keeps helping them. And they, if you look at someone you probably all know someone whose life's got something in repeat. It's either your own life or someone close to you, someone you worked with, some family member, and you're thinking, what is going on? Like everybody keeps helping this person, and it just keeps happening. It's because their soul's trying to learn something here, and somehow it's not getting that. So if you look at their cycle and you realize somebody's been stepping in and helping them repetitively, then that's not actually been helpful. And it makes everybody feel good in the moment, but it doesn't feel good long term because now we've got 15 years of suffering instead of 1, right? So find ways to be okay in the self with working for whatever is in your greatest good, for whatever is in someone else's greatest good. Sometimes the not giving them information is the kindest thing that you can do. Or telling them that you love them and that you support whatever it is that they choose, but you can't engage. It doesn't feel resonant to engage, or you're getting intuition that says it's not resonant to engage in that way, but it doesn't have any bearing on how much you love them, is the best thing that you can do. And you can say, I'm going to send you all the energy I can, that you get the clarity and strength and empowerment to get through this or overcome this. So, any questions real quick about ethics? I don't want to spend the whole night on it. I will tell you that I do have some bigger plans for teaching bigger intuition classes in person once we all come out of quarantine, and there will be a bigger ethics class around that will be a prerequisite for that. I can't tell you enough how crucial that is. And for me, it's a deal breaker. I take teaching intuition very seriously, and I take the use of it very seriously. And when I teach someone how to do something, there's a certain level of responsibility that I feel for what you know around that. I obviously cannot teach everyone everything, but I can't teach you without teaching you some level of comprehension around greatest good and ethics with that. So if you have a question at any point, just digitally raise your hand, and we'll tackle those kind of as they come up. So doesn't look like there's any right now. Let's move on to how to ask a question. And outside of ethics kind of being the foundation around the balance of all things here, you could have all the intuition in the world, and if you don't understand the language around asking questions or how to communicate, you're going to really struggle to feel like anything's clear to you. So let me make an example. And I use this example a fair amount in various circumstances. But most people believe that most people want to be intuitive because they genuinely believe that if they just knew more, they'd be better. Better financially, better emotionally, they wouldn't get hurt. Better logistically, they'd navigate their life better. And I will tell you that there is certainly something to be said for having some additional information around things, but it isn't going to prevent your soul from getting the lessons that it's intended to get, no matter how much you use this tool. But it is excellent for helping you navigate that large bandwidth of neutral things. As well as, there's never going to be just one way to get something that's in your greatest good. There's going to be options to that. There'll be 6 ways to get something that's in your greatest good. And you can use this tool to sort of navigate that. But if you don't understand how to ask the question or where to start with the line of questioning, there's the challenge. So let's start with that. In our example, you live in Ohio, and you can't stand it. You're ready to move. And you've been hunting for a job, desperately hunting for a job. And 2 dream jobs have come up. You've interviewed with both of them. They both want you. They're in different cities. One's going to be in San Diego, and one's going to be in New York, right? And you love both of those places. Great, cool, big cities, totally different climates, but you like them both. And these are dream jobs, right? We have a tendency to start asking questions outside of ourselves, like with our intuition, at the point at which we feel stuck, where we say, I don't know. I don't know what to do. So the typical process here for anyone who wanted to use their intuition would be like, okay, these 2 jobs have been offered to me. Most people would say, which one should I take? And if you've been in any classes of mine before or had a reading with me, you know that the other side is endlessly correcting the concept of should. Should is a human concept. It does not translate to the other side. You cannot use it in asking questions. Should implies that there is one and only one right answer, and everything else is some version of wrong. Should also produces obligatory behavior and guilt. So should and its counterparts shouldn't, supposed to, the right thing, and often words like good, and their equals are problematic. They're also vague, good and bad in particular, very vague words. So the knee-jerk response is, I'm gonna go use this tool and I'm gonna figure out which job I should take, right? Or should I stay in my relationship? Or should I quit my job? Or whatever it is that you're asking. So the problem is that at that point, you start asking where you're lost, and you're making an awful lot of assumptions about all of the decisions that led to this point, right? So we would say, most people would say, which job should I take? First, you would want to turn that into a greatest good statement and remember that there's always more than one thing that can be in your greatest good. So the question would really be, which one of these jobs is one of these jobs in my greatest good, or which one of these jobs is in my greatest good? But the which idea also implies that it's going to be one or the other, and it could be both. But if you back up, and if you ask that, so this tool that we use kind of works with a weight system, like you're the scale. And so I'm going to show you this just for example, and I'll explain how it works later. So if this was yes and this was no, and you'd say, oh gosh, or is it in my greatest good? At least we got the languaging right? Is it in my greatest good that I take the job in San Francisco? Yes and no. Yes. Remember that there's going to be a second piece to that. Just because one is in your greatest good doesn't mean that the other is not, right? And would say, well, is it in my greatest good to take the one in New York? Yes. Well, that's not helpful, right? If you said, which job should I take? You might not get anything. And this is the challenge. People will say, I've asked questions. I learned this tool, and I didn't get anything. If you're not getting anything, there's almost always a real clear-cut reason why, probably where you start with where you started your question. The real first question, the starting point question, is it in my greatest good to be taking either of the two jobs that was offered to me? Right? But we've assumed that. See, as human beings, we've been looking for this job. We've been trying to get these jobs. We've worked hard to get these jobs. We've got it in our mind that these are our dream jobs and this is what it's going to take and it makes the right amount of money. We've got to get out of Ohio. So we've made all of these assumptions about what's good for us. And we don't start asking until we narrow it down to a place where we don't know which one to do. But the first question is it in my greatest good to take either of these jobs that's currently being offered to me, right? And if you got a yes, then you would say, is the job in San Diego in my greatest good? Yes. Don't forget to ask the other piece, right? Because there's never just one way. Is the job in New York in my greatest good? Yes. Don't think that's the end of the options, right? There are jobs out there you haven't interviewed for yet, or maybe they haven't called you back, right? Or they're not available just yet. So, is it in my greatest, are there other jobs out there that are going to serve my greatest good right now? And you could get a yes for that. So what happens is, because most of us were raised in a world that taught you should, the idea that there's one and only one right way to do something and that you have to follow the rule or follow the smart thing, follow the plan. And we deeply seek freedom and empowerment. And we want to be getting it from ourselves or from our higher self. We don't want somebody else telling us what we should do. If you're not careful, one, you'll turn your divination tool here into your new version of should, which is problematic in and of itself, because it's really crucial that you still enact free will choice, right? And that you don't turn, well, the guide said, or my higher self said, so this is what I have to do, or this is what I should do. You can ask questions around greatest good all day, and then if you just interpret that as a should, this is what I should do, you're creating a whole another series of problems. You're just sort of making your guides your new parents, right? So you're seeking freedom, and then you're doing something that's actually taking that freedom away from you. So remember, these are pieces of information that you are seeking so that you can make a more fully fleshed out free will choice, not find out what the new rule is. Just because something's in your greatest good doesn't mean you have to do it. Or someone else, doesn't mean they have to do it. It's part of the information. And in that grouping of information, there will be what I think, and what I believe and what I feel, right? And now that we've been teaching resonant tools and we're moving into a resonant-based energetic system rather than a rule-based or plan-based energetic system, is this resonant with me? And this tool here helps you determine like the things that are in alignment with your greatest good. So let's get to the tool here for a second, because the more we use it, and as you come up with questions that you might ask using this tool, if you are struggling, raise your hand in the app and we'll work through them in this process. So I'm not sure if on the video, the picture is actually inverted, but this is my right hand and this is my left. So what you want to do, and I'm going to back up a little bit so that you can see. You don't have to be sitting. I just happen to sit like this all the time. It's comfortable. My knees don't like me, but it's comfortable for me the rest of the time. So energy does not move well on a tight system. So if you're tight in your body, if your shoulders are crunched up, if your spine's out of alignment, if your body is tight, energy is not going to move well on it. So if you are trying to get intuition, work with getting more conscious of your intuition, one of the things, especially for this tool, that you want to be doing is you want to make sure that you're relaxing your shoulders. You might not even realize how much tension you're holding in your body. We have a tendency to raise our shoulders, right? They get tight, they get high. We also have a tendency to pull them forward, right? Most people are not actually postured well for good energy movement, right? But if you're pulling your shoulders back really hard, that's not relaxed either. So you just want to get your shoulders as relaxed as possible, right? Which might mean that you just kind of roll them around just so that they kind of get the idea that, oh, we don't have to be tight right now. And we're going to use our hands, our arms as sort of conduits, and our hands like a scale, like the scales that tip and you can put weight in one side and it's balancing the other. In this tool, you're going to ask or tell, depends on how you want to look at it. You're going to tell the other side or your higher self or whatever it is that you're terming that, to weight the hand that is the answer, right? So just like, and sometimes it might feel like someone's put a piece of paper in a hand. Sometimes it might feel like there's a cannonball that got put in your hand, right? But weight the hand that is the answer. Now, and unless you're a Hindu god embodied in the moment, you've got two hands, right? So if you have two arms and two hands, you only have two options you can work with at any given point, right? And you think, well, what if I have more options than that? Well, that's what we're going to work with here. So it's helpful to start learning how this works. And as you work with it, there's a tendency to get your shoulders higher and higher, right? We get tight, we get nervous, we get like, oh, I don't know what's happening. Just roll your arms out and put them back out, right? This is not tight. We don't have our elbows tucked next to our body, right? Let me pull these up so you can see, right? We're loose. We're just loose, right? We're kind of loosely holding, our hands are floating out here, should be kind of mobile, right? Not tight, loose. And you don't have to have your hands hard flat, right? That's tight, loose, loose. If you're standing, you want to make sure that your knees are bent. When you lock your knees, it is extremely difficult for the full flow of your energy in your system to work, whether you're locking one knee or whether you're locking both. So, if you're standing there talking to someone or you're standing in your kitchen and you want to ask a question, you go like this, and you don't get anything, make sure your knees are not locked. So it's helpful to do a little bit of practice around what things might feel like. And some of you may get powerful, impactful weight feelings in one hand or the other right away. And others of you might need to practice with that. Some of it's going to be the questions that we use as an example. So right now, we're going to use one hand as a yes. I'm going to use my left hand as a yes and my right hand as a no. And I do it that way. You can do it however you want. You can do them the opposite of that. But I have a tendency to language yes or no. I don't say no or yes. I tend to say yes or no. And because I read left to right, the left hand always ends up being yes, the right hand ends up being no. It works well for my system. You can put your hands out like this and make sure it's, relaxed, and say which hand is the yes hand, weight the hand that is the yes hand, and you'll feel something in one of the hands, right? Weight the hand that is the no hand, and you'll feel something. Now, you may feel actual movement in your hand, right? But I wouldn't be super disappointed if you don't get that right off the bat. It's not about are you actually having movement. It's about are you feeling the sensation of weight or pressure in one hand or the other, right? So we're going to start with only that which is in my greatest good will happen for me here. You always start with that. I know it's really tempting to want to get answers to everything, but if it's not, you want to be starting off with working with actually what's in your soul's greatest good. So only that which is in my greatest good is going to happen for me here. And I would like for you to weight the hand that is the yes hand. So just take a breath, relax your body, put your hands out here, and ask for that. Figure out which hand is your yes hand. Weight the hand that is my yes hand. Okay, some of you are apparently also getting tingling stuff in your arms. Just try to think about the weight in the hand rather than the energy moving on the arms. So shake them out, put them back out here in their loose equilibrium state, and ask to weight the hand that is the no hand. And then ask for an example in the yes hand. So it also may feel to some of you a little bit cool, or it might feel a bit warm, or you might feel a buzzing in that hand. We're asking for weight, but that doesn't mean your system is automatically going to translate it that way. Every human being's kind of their own chemistry and their own makeup, and it may show up for you differently. But you're looking for something in your hands, right? So if you want to practice this yes and no concept, which I strongly encourage practice, the more you do this, the faster it gets, the more autopilot you get into communicating appropriately for the kinds of information that you're after. So practice is good, even if you think you don't need it. So I will tell you, this is a tool that the other side taught me for a different reason when I was little. And don't think that because it was taught to a child that it's a childish tool. It is a wicked, powerful tool, and I still occasionally use it, right? I get all kinds of information from the other side, and they never shut up. But I am still completely capable of getting in the way of that information if I'm asking a question for myself, or if I have some attachment to that information. And it's really hard to be, if you're asking questions for yourself, it's hard not to be attached to that. If you're saying, am I sick? Do I have cancer? Is my partner going to leave me? You're asking because you have an attachment to the answer most of the time. So the key and the workaround for that is to get out of your brain, get into like something that's kind of slightly outside of you. It's not in here. It's going to be out here. And also say, I'm more attached to the clarity and truth of the information than I am for what the information is. I want information that's in my greatest good, right? Yes. Okay. So we want to practice with solid yeses and solid nos. And that means that we need to ask a question of our higher self guides, whatever that is, that we know is unequivocally going to give us a yes or unequivocally going to give us a no. And that sounds simple at its incept. You might say, oh, sure, I know something that's definitely yes. My name is Julie. The problem is that you're talking to your guides, your higher self, that is not operating in the 3D world in a linear time construct. And I can guarantee that this is probably the only human experience where my name was Julie. So if I just say, yes and no, yes and no. And I do have a tendency to do that, right? Like if I go to do this tool, I always kind of lay one hand out in my mind. I'm not necessarily saying it out loud. I'm like, yes and no, you know. And if I say, my name is Julie, I don't get anything, right? Or sometimes, let me see if I can get my hands out where you can see them better. This is not how I would suggest you sit because it's too tight in the body, but I'm just trying to show you. If I ask a question and I don't get anything, right? If this is my yes and this is my no, I ask a question and there's nothing. Chances are that I'm asking the wrong question or there's something wrong with the question. I'm not getting any answer. I've started in the wrong place, which we talked briefly about and we'll come back to. So the real unequivocal yes is that in this life, I was named Julie. Yes, right? In this life, I was named Sam. Nope, right? But if I just say my name is Julie, I might not get anything because we're dealing with across all time and all space and all potential lives. The human plane looks at time from a linear standpoint, and that's not really the way that it works. So you're trying to get information from a universal place. You have to work in the universal construct of that, not your human 3D human plane construct. So at this time, or in this life, right? So I want you to just remember to relax your shoulders. And if you are going by a name that is not what you were given, right? Make sure your sentence is, I am known as so-and-so at this time, right? Or like if you're testing for the yes. So let's start with that. Either pick your name and say, my given name, or people call me such and such at this time. Take a breath and relax. Make sure your lungs are relaxed and your diaphragm's relaxed, or your arms are relaxed, and ask that question. You don't have to ask it out loud. It's helpful if you do when you're practicing. In this life, I am known as. Okay. And then same yes and no. Pick a name that you are definitely not called in this lifetime. Unequivocally, no one's ever called you that you know of, far from it, right? And ask that question. Breath, relax. In this life, I am known as, and see if you can feel that weight in the no hand. Okay, so let's pick another. Your name is not the only unequivocal yes or no that you can use. But, if you say things like, I live in Ohio, I mean, in this life, in this body, in this particular 3D reality, yeah, that's technically part of me lives in Ohio. The rest of me is at other places in the universe. So it's a complicated thing. Things that you think are simple, especially if you're trying to practice for yes and no, need to be narrowed down to this time, right, and this space, if you're practicing for yeses and nos. And sometimes when you're asking questions in a bigger picture. So let's pick another thing. Try to find simple things, right? If you know for sure, unequivocally, the last thing you ate, whether it was an Oreo or, what you had for dinner. Now, if you had a piece of fish and broccoli for dinner, and you can't remember which one was the last piece that you stuck in your mouth, that could be a problematic question to use. You could say, well, I had fish. Well, what else was with that fish? Broccoli. Did you finish the fish before the broccoli? Did you put a piece of broccoli in your mouth the last time? Like, what? If you don't remember, you can't use that, Or you can say the last thing that I ate, today in this body, or the last piece of food that I put into this body was either broccoli or fish, or an Oreo. Broccoli or fish, an Oreo, right? So it doesn't have to be yes or no. You could say, it's either was broccoli or fish. Yes. If you say it was an Oreo and that isn't what it was, you'll get the no. So pick something, whether it was a drink that you are unequivocally sure of, or a piece of food that you unequivocally ate, and yes and no. We're just dealing with yes and no right now. And make sure your shoulders are relaxed and you've taken a breath, and ask the question. The reason, once you get familiar with this, you do not need to ask this question out loud. But I would really encourage you, when you are learning this, that you ask these questions out loud, that you potentially record yourself. Most of you have cell phones that allow you to record yourself. Record yourself asking these questions out loud, and then, go back and listen to the way that you asked it. Most of us are not very cognizant of the language that we're using or how it can trip up things. And so when we're trying to get intuition, we'll say, well, I don't know why I'm not getting an answer, or I thought I got this answer, but it turned out to not be accurate, right? So it's, and as the years are going by, the other side's getting more and more picky about language. And if you have any lessons at all, and most of you will, particularly if you're trying to engage in greater intuition, you are asking, literally asking, for clarity and growth around clear communication. And that's going to be language. So by doing it out loud, you can retrain your languaging to actually speak to what you meant, which is not what most people do. So in a reading, people will ask a question, for example, and most of the time, their language isn't accurate for what they mean. And the other side will have me say to them, well, you asked this, and the answer for that is this thing here. But what you meant was this, and the answer for that is over here, right? They pick people apart on their language, some more than others. If you've been in a session of mine, you've been one of those picked apart people, you understand that there's a reason for that. The language with which you communicate with the self, with others, with the universe matters, because your intention, the language follows the intention. If you are not clear in your intention, it's going to show up in your language. So you can reverse engineer for mental clarity. Listen to this. You can reverse engineer for mental clarity by paying attention and re-engineering your language. If you're trying to get clear with the self, watch the language you use. Don't make excuses for what you just said, right? So someone will say something to me in my world, the other side's correcting language all the time, mine and everyone else's, whether it's a social situation or not. And so, I'll be in a session or hanging out with someone, and they'll say something, and I will say, oh, you mean this? And they'll go, yeah. Or I'll say, is that really what you think? Well, no, but that's what you said. So oftentimes when we get called out on our language, we'll backpedal. We all do it, right? We backpedal. Well, that isn't what I really meant, especially if we are using language that implies something we're uncomfortable with. If we say something that we're afraid of something, and I would say to them, why are you afraid? Well, I'm not really afraid. Yeah, your language says you are. So we backpedal because we don't want to look at the truth of what's going on in us, or we don't want to take the effort to be clear around those things. And if you are wanting to get intuitive information that's clear, and you're the vessel for that transmission of information, you have to be clear. You cannot expect to get clear information if you're a muddy channel, right? So ask your questions clearly. Do it out loud. I would encourage you to practice by thinking about a couple of things that you want to ask and write it down on paper, right? Write it out. Is it in my greatest good to blank, right? Just some yes or no questions. At this time, is it in my greatest good to move to California? Sounds like a great idea. But what if it's in your greatest good 5 years from now and what you meant was right now? Right? Is it in my greatest good to move to San Diego at this time, or in the next 2 months, or for this job that's being offered to me? Right? Qualify it. Because otherwise you'll move to, San Diego and think like you're following what's in your soul's greatest good, and you checked in and your intuition said this, and you get out there and it's a complete and total train wreck, right? Now, maybe your soul needed a train wreck, right? That's what the soul was after, so that's the answer that you got. But also it could be that you didn't clarify the question, and it was in your greatest good to move to San Diego next year. But you didn't even think about that. You didn't ask that. You just, that's in my greatest good. So I'm going, right? And if you'd have waited a year, it could have been an entirely different experience. But now you're going to struggle for a year, right? Maybe unnecessarily. Now, if that's your soul's lesson, and there's not much you're going to do about that. But you don't know that if you're not getting clarity in the way that you ask the actual questions. So write your questions down. I don't care if you write your questions down for the rest of your life and read them off. What is this? And you read it off of the paper and do this so that you make sure that our messy brain isn't slightly inferring something different or changed a piece of language that completely changes the answer, right? Or the quality of that answer because we aren't spot on. So you can retrain clarity in your brain by retraining your language, and you retrain your language by awareness of your language. And how do you get that awareness? You say it out loud, you write it down, you listen to yourself, you look at your question and say, is that actually what I'm asking? Is that what I mean? Right? So pick your food thing, food or drink thing. Practicing yes or no, yes, no. In my case, it would be the last thing that I put into my physical system, into my body as food or drink was coffee. Yes, it's like a rock. Yes, right. So say it out loud so you hear yourself. The last thing that I put into my body was, and what do you get? Now, pick something you did not put into your body last, right? Because we're not trying to actually get answers at this moment. We're trying to get you familiar with what answers feel like. Yes, no. Might feel like paper, might feel like a rock, right? In my case, I will tell you my experience with this. When it is, most of the time, it's going to be a pretty light feeling. I don't need a cannonball in my hand, right, to know. I get it. That at this point, once you get the habit of this, there's not even, you can rapid fire ask questions, and it's sort of like it's just literally. So the better you get at it, the faster you can do it. You don't even have to get all the way through your sentence, because if your intention is actually clear and you've taught it to be clear through engineering your language, the intention is way faster. Speaking is slow and inefficient. That's why the other side doesn't use it, right? What you think, you can have a massive concept of thought full of movie clips and pictures and sensory components and time in, fraction of a second. But to language all of that might take you an hour or longer, right? So what happens in here is fast, but we have to train it to be clear, or quickness is irrelevant, right? So write your questions down, make sure you're checking your language, and you're always starting with, it's in my greatest, I only want that which is in my greatest good to happen for me at this point, or in these questions. I only want information that's in my greatest good to know. Unequivocal yeses, unequivocal nos. The last thing that I put into my body was earthworms, right? No. So strong yeses sometimes, or strong nos, will feel like a heavy weight, but it's not necessary. Can be really, really light. Can be super subtle. And you're learning, so it's not necessarily going to be like a cannonball. It might be super subtle. If you don't feel like you're getting anything, roll your arms, shake, take a breath, body relaxed, Okay. So we've been at this for about an hour. We're just kind of touching the surface of this this tool, but I know that some of you might need a break here for a minute. So we're going to take about 10 minutes. It won't be any longer than that for sure. Go get a drink, run to the restroom. This is a good time if you are having a question with this tool or you're struggling with this tool. Digitally raise your hand. It's not very easy for me to manage all the chat window and the things that go on in the chat window. I will take a look at that during the break, but we're going to take a 10-minute break. Go get a drink, shake your body out, relax it, run to the restroom, whatever you need, and we'll be right back. Okay? So welcome back. Hope you guys got everything you needed in the break. I have been looking at some of the questions in the chat. Also, thank you, everyone who wished me happy early birthday. That's very nice. I appreciate that. And I want to go through and just address these questions individually so you get the answer you need before we get too far into anything else. And Kath, I do see your hand up here, so I will get to that in just a minute. Let's see. So Heather S. asks, so what if you yourself are asking for energy healing from a healer? And we were probably talking about energy that's in your greatest good, or the ethics of being inappropriate in helping someone. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. You know, I encourage asking for help, but I would encourage you to ask that help come in the form that is in your greatest good as gently as possible, right? Sometimes as gentle as is possible is getting T-boned, right? Like that's just gentle as it's going to be. But if there's availability for it to be difficult or it to be easy, you know, ask for the way that you want it, you know, as gentle as is possible, and still be clear, you know. So sometimes for me, I go to practitioners. I have healers that I work with. I don't call them healers because the term puts the power of healing in the other person. And most of the people I work with don't call themselves healers either. They call themselves practitioners. So they're facilitators of healing energy. Because even though they may not be using terms such as greatest good, they're functioning from that process, and they're not trying to heal you as much as they are trying to give you an opportunity to heal the self if it's in your greatest good. So they're practitioners, they're facilitators. And when I get on someone's table, regardless of what they call themselves, regardless of what they think they're going to be doing to me, right? I could have made the appointment. I want the healing, whatever that might be. I want this pain in my shoulder blade to be over, or I want this pain in my heart to be over, whatever it is that's going on, right? I have a want, right? You're going to have a want. But I get on that table or I go into that session and I state, you know, and I don't have to state it out loud, but it might help you to do so, that only that which is in my greatest good is going to happen for me here, right? And so if it's in my greatest good that my shoulder blade feels better, then it will. If it's in my greatest good that it's a slow process, it'll be a slow process, regardless of the fact that I want it fixed right now, you know. And I align, genuinely align. I mean, I honor my want. I want it fixed right now, but I'm okay with it being, you know, a three-part process. If that's actually what's in my greatest good, I don't want things that are not in my greatest good. You know, I can be bummed that one-time session isn't going to do it. That's not what's in my greatest good. But I'll tell you, you know, we all want everything right now. Of course we do. We're in pain, or we're stuck, or we're suffering, or it's just stressful, whatever it is. We want it right now. We want everything to be like Amazon Prime, right? But more often than not, particularly if you're unwell, if you have a physical ailment, you have physical challenges, more often than not, healing quickly is problematic. It's dangerous, right? So you want the healing to be as quick as is possible, you know, in your greatest good, as quickly as is in your greatest good, as gently as possible. You can make it quicker, right, than is gentle. So what's more important to you? You want to suffer it out and have a healing crisis, you know? And that's what we do a lot of times is we'll go, and it happens because we're not managing our own self, or the practitioner isn't managing what they're doing. There's a lot of powerful practitioners out there. You may be one of them, and if you have any ego is a ruiner of so many things. If you have any ego around, I'm going to heal this person, I'm going to fix this person, I'm going to make them feel better, if you in any way value yourself based off of the client's outcome, then there's going to be a subtle pressure in you to produce viable, tangible results. Heal it all right now, make it all better right now. And that's not being ethical. That's you getting your fix, right? You're not asking about what's in the greatest good of the actual client. You think you know, right? That's what we do. We think we know. We want them to be better right now. We don't want them to suffer. They're saying they're tired of suffering. They want it all better right now. We've got an ego. We want them, we want them to think we're amazing. So they come back and tell their friends, whatever it is you got going on in there. And so practitioners will sometimes push a lot of energy on a person, for healing. And it just makes a healing crisis. So I would, take responsibility for yourself. You're going to a practitioner, regardless of what they call themselves. Their capabilities are going to be wide and varied. But you want to be responsible for the self. Only that which is in my greatest good is going to happen for me here, right? I want this, but more than healing, I want it to be in my greatest good. I want it to be in the time frame that's in my greatest good, right? So hopefully that answered your question there, Heather. And if not, throw the rest of it. You raise your hand actually in the app. It'd probably be easier to talk to you if that didn't answer the question exactly. So good question. What else do we have here in the chat? I'm glad to see a lot of comments from all of you talking about how much you value the ethics piece of that and the pieces that we were talking about around ethics. That's crucially, it's so important to me. And it's the thing that's kept me from teaching any of these things for a long time. And it may keep me from teaching it still. So, you all are an anomaly in this. This class is an anomaly. I don't typically do this because it concerns me greatly that people misuse, even with good intentions, but misuse their skills and their abilities. Because as much as we don't want to be people who are functioning from ego, the culture has taught us to do that, and it's taught us codependency, and it's taught us to be responsible for other people's well-being, and it's taught us that our value is based in other people's perception of us. So if they think we're great, then we're great. If they think we're a great healer, then we're a great healer. If they think we're a great reader, we're a great reader. And if that's how you function, it's challenging, and you stop working with what's in the greatest good and you start working in the ego. So this kind of helps you with that. So I'm happy to see you all. Happy to see you all on board with that. So Jim, good to see you in here, Jim. Jim says, when it's an obvious no, there's pressure for your subconscious to already answer because it's a no, right? There could be. The point of the process really is to get you kind of out of the way. It's going to be more noticeable that your subconscious is engaging in that when we're practicing because you know the answers, right? But there's an upside to that. You're practicing. It's going to be a yes. So there's a tendency to kind of be looking for that yes in this hand. You're either going to be supported like, oh, there it is. Or you're going to be like, well, shit, why is it over here? Let me just take care of that for a second. There you go. Okay. So it's possible that your subconscious get in the way, but the point of this is to get your subconscious out of the way. And remember, if your subconscious is engaging here, to say, I am more interested in the clarity of the answer than what the answer is, right? And it'll be easier when you're not dealing with something where you actually already know the answer. But again, we're typically only asking questions when we're invested in the answer. So, it's a challenge. And the more you practice it, the easier it will get. Language plays heavily into how we phrase those questions sometimes. But again, practice. Write your questions out. Look at your languaging. And it's you'll learn better divination over time. And sometimes it doesn't take that much time. Sometimes it's super fast, you just get it right off the bat. And other times it takes practice. Sometimes because we're tighter than we think we are. Sometimes we're not breathing. Sometimes we're looking for a cannonball and what we're getting is a feather. And if you get caught up in how it's supposed to be, that could be a problem too. So you just, you can ask for that to be more obvious. And I think someone asked that in here. So, actually, it's the very next question. So Kimberly is asking if the sensation is light, like light in weight, and we feel like we might be missing or misinterpreting, can we ask that the answer be stronger, more obvious, heavier? Absolutely. Like, that's my favorite thing. There were things going on in my particular world a long time ago, and I would ask the other side, to make it obvious. And again, and I remembered like, I got to make it gentle, because obvious was not so gentle, right? So, the same rule applies here, or the same concept really applies here. So you can say, I'm struggling to discern the weight here. Can you make it gentle but more obvious if it's in my greatest good? And you might get, that might be more applicable. But remember, you want to keep it in your hands. If you were part of the resonance class last week, we were using a very similar structure here, with our arms, but we were looking for a resonant feeling in the body. And this is about putting a feeling or a vibration or a sense, a concept of weight in a hand, because you're operating like a scale. So don't get them confused, or you'll start feeling things in your body, and that makes it very complicated when you get outside of yes and no. This is really, we're practicing with yeses and nos here, but this is really going to get more detailed than that. This is just your learning discernment, right? Yes, no. So definitely ask for it to be more obvious. Sometimes it's the question you're asking too. So maybe the questions that we were using weren't producing solid, like rock solid answers for you, right? And again, if you didn't say only that which is in my greatest good will happen for me here, then maybe, maybe it's not, there's other things going on. The other piece I want to mention around this too, it's really not in everyone's greatest good to get conscious access to their guides. If it were really truly in your greatest good, you'd all have it already on an everyday basis, right? That doesn't mean it's, remember, required. That small number of things required. But it's, for most people, it's not against your greatest good either. But the challenge is going to be, so let me just throw an option out here. If you keep struggling with this, think about why are you learning this? Because the process is inherent, right? There's nothing wrong with your energy. But if you have a mindset going on in you that is problematic around like, I'm going to learn how to do this, and I'm going to, really going to be able to help people. Ding, 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 big red flag, right? You can say, or if you're tying it to your value, I'm going to learn how to do this, and that'll make me special, right? That's great. If you have ego lessons around that, like it'll show it to you. But sometimes you're not going to get answers because it's genuinely not in your greatest good to be doing this tool, right? You have something in the way. But more often than not, like I said, more often than not, you're not getting a big sensation because the question might be wrong, or you're starting the question in the wrong place. So practice. Remember, it might be really light in the beginning, and it might change pretty quickly. It's not just a matter of getting the sensation. It's a matter of getting your system trained to how that sensation works. When you learned how to drive a car, it was a slow, clunky process, right? Like turn my turn signal on, put the car in gear. It's slow, and it's not intuitive. No pun intended. It's a process you got to think about. Same is true with walking. When you learn to walk, which you probably don't remember, when you learn to speak, all of these things. But once you get them, they kind of just go on autopilot, which is why it's so important that when you're learning to do this, you learn to language appropriately, truthfully, for what it is that you're asking. Because if you put this process on autopilot with dysfunctional language, you will feel like you're getting lied to all the time, or you'll be giving out information to yourself and maybe other people that is inherently inaccurate, right? So, it's not going to give you, this tool is not going to give you an answer to everything, but it can give you a lot, and it just takes practice. So some of you, like I said, are going to have a little bit better luck with it than others. Let's see, Darby with a yes and a no. So thank you for that question, Kimberly, by the way. That's a good question. Darby is asking, with yes or no, do you state out loud, so the quotation is, in my greatest good, the last liquid I placed in my body was water. You don't really need to do that because that doesn't fit in the sentence, right? You want to start out with, like, I only want that which is in my greatest good to happen for me here, right? And I'm more attached to the clarity of the answer than what the answer is. And then your question is, the last liquid I placed in my body was water. And you get the yes or no. And you don't have to do the greatest good before every question. You're really just setting the tone for this particular session. And if you go do something else, you come back an hour later and you got more questions to ask, and you state it again. Particularly because you're really trying to retrain your system to really function in that which is in your greatest good, which is probably not trained for just yet, right? It's habitually trained for what's comfortable, what you want. And if you really want to be more intuitive, you got to get your own ego and your own wants out of the way. It doesn't mean you devalue them or you ignore them or you shove them under the rug. It means that you don't make them the priority in the question asking process. You already know what you want. You're looking for what the other side's saying at the moment. And you're still going to have free will choice around this. Like, this is what's resonant. Here are my actual options, that kind of thing. So hopefully that answered that question for you, Darby. If not, just raise your hand and we'll come back to that. Let's see what else we have here real quick. Is there an Jeannie's or Jean? I'm not sure which. I've got a couple people with that name spelled that way in my world, so I'm not sure if it's Jeannie or Jean. Is there an alternate way to do this if you don't have use of both arms? What else can be used for handicapped people? So yes, you can. You can pick 2 points on your body, right? Try to pick one on the right and the left, though. It does seem to be a lot easier if you have something on either side of the hara line. So you can use your feet, right? You could do a sensation in the top of your feet. You could do a sensation over each eyebrow. You could make one eyelid heavier than the other. I wouldn't do things like making one eye water more than the other because it won't clear up fast enough to ask the next question. So you want something that there can be a sensation and then it can end, pretty quickly without there being a residual to it. So anything, if you don't have 2 arms, if you don't have 2 feet, or if you have arms and feet but you don't feel them, make a twitch on either side of your mouth. For most people, they're much more sensitive to their hands, and it's helpful for them to start that way. But work with what you have. If the best you can do is a spot here on your left and a spot here on your right or over your eyebrows, use those. It doesn't matter what it is. It's not limited to the hands. So all you're trying to do is train the system to get kind of on autopilot with the sensation and the 2 locations that you're going to pick those sensations up in. And for most people, it's going to be quicker or faster through their hands. But yeah, you can use all kinds of things. Let me see if there's, so Sandra is asking, how can I differentiate between what I really want as an answer and the answer I receive from a guide? Am I influencing the answer? So I think we talked a little bit about that, and you're less likely to influence an answer in this methodology than you would be with a pendulum, right? And here's why. In a pendulum, I don't have one handy. It's in a drawer over there somewhere. But in a pendulum, the energy is coming through us down our arm, right, and into the pendulum, right? That's how that works. That's not what we're doing here. We're not really running on our cyclical system, which is why in answering the last question, it doesn't matter if you use your arms. If we were using this cyclical system, which you've maybe heard me talk about in other classes, then yes, you could be more in the way. But this is outside of us. We're not asking for a vibration to come through our body and vibrate in this hand. We're asking for weight to be placed outside of us, like in either of these hands, right? And the body to pick up that sensation. Since everything in the universe is really just energy and your hand's not really solid, right? Then they can put a bowling ball in that hand, or the energy of the weight of a bowling ball, and it'll not really be there, right? It's outside of you though. So you can get yourself too caught up in the way, but like we talked about, if you're struggling with that, take a big breath and mean it when you say it. You can't half-ass this. Mean it when you say, I'm genuinely more attached. I want to know. So keep that in mind. Practice, the better it will get there. So let me see if there's any other questions here real quick. I saw Kath took her hand down, so we must have offered that. Kimberly said, thanks, that helps. Good. I'm glad that answered your question for you. So since there's no other questions in the chat, I want to take this tool and put it into a little bit more complex Q&A. And we talked about this earlier in the examples that I was giving you, but I want to go back to it because since you didn't know how the tool worked just yet, it might not have been as clear. And tool's not any good if there's not clarity in it, right? So let's that we had, so that by doubling back to it, there's some familiarity with that. So, you know, we've relaxed our shoulders, and you don't have to do this right now because these are not your actual questions, right? But, you know, we've got our hands out here. We don't have our hands, like if you were in the resonance class, you would have seen that I kind of have a tendency to lay my hands in teaching that on my knees or on something like that, but it's hard to perceive a weight when there's something underneath of your hand, which is why I put them out here in the air, right? It's easier to get some movement. So this movement right here just reminded me that I want to tell you something. If you happen to get this shifting weight kind of feeling, it is definitely an answer, but it's telling you that your question's not clear. It's yes and no, right? Or that you need to clarify the question more clearly, right? So this is the universe saying, we'd like to answer your question, but it's muddy. Excuse me. So let's go back to, well, before we jump into that, let me ask John's question because it might, I don't want to get too far. Are you there, John? You have to unmute yourself too, John. There you are.
Okay. So I was just wondering, are you freezing up because of your internet, my internet, or because the universe is trying to prevent us from communicating?
It would be, it's probably not my internet because I just got like business class wicked high internet. So I think it's the internet in the world actually is a little bit overloaded.
Okay.
Was there a fair amount of information lost there?
15, 20 seconds, 3 times.
Okay. Well, luckily the
Not
recording.
awful.
Okay, thank you for letting me know about that. Luckily the recording is coming out nice and clear. So if there are pieces there that are really important to you, since I don't know which pieces people have missed, you know, keep a time mark of that, and you all can go back and watch. Remember that these classes are all getting placed on YouTube, so you can go back and revisit them too. So thank you very much, John. I appreciate that. Okay, and please do not, just as a side note, don't unmute yourself during class by accident, because when you do that, it changes the screen over to your screen and you don't even realize that, that is what's happening. So I'll unmute you all if you have a question and then put you back on mute when we're all done. So back to our example here. So again, you don't need to do this right now because these are not your questions, but I do want you to sort of be thinking of a question that might be going on in your world right now. that you might want some clarity for in the moment, and think about how you might work that question with this information. So remember, in our example sake earlier, we'd been really hunting for a job. There were these things we really wanted, and they had shown up. You know, we had two choices, a job in San Diego and a job in New York. And, you know, we want to know. So I'm going to use that new tool, right? So you get your shoulders relaxed and take your breath and you say, okay, is it in, you know, only that which is in my greatest good is going to happen for me here? Is it in my greatest good that I take the job in? Now, here's where you're not doing yes and no. If you think you only have two answers, or you can narrow it down to just two, at least in a temporary way, just follow me here. You can make one hand one answer and one hand the other. So it doesn't have to be yes and no. It can be San Diego and New York, right? And so we'll say, okay, only that which is in my greatest good is going to happen for me here. Is it in my greatest good? And I have a tendency to lay my hand out. It's a habit. You don't have to do that. But what it does is it kind of revalidates or identifies in my system every time, like what is what, right? Is it in my greatest good to take the job and move to San Diego or New York City? Right? And oh, I got this, right? I got this. Now, I'm making that obvious for you all, but that's the feeling you might get. Or you might get nothing. Got nothing. And you'll be like, well, shit, it's not working. If you got this or you got nothing, think about what you're asking. Where are you starting in your process? This is the most common problem, always. Where are you starting in your process? The actual starting point is it in my greatest good to be taking one of the two jobs that's being offered to me at this point? Yes or no? That's the starting point. You've made all these assumptions that one of these two jobs is in your greatest good already, right? And you've excluded all the other options. You have narrowed it down to these two options and these two options alone. And you may be accurate, but you may not be accurate, right? So we can do it with three things. Let's say we got a job offer in San Diego, one in New York City, and one in Miami. I don't have three hands, right? So only that which is in my greatest good is going to happen for me here. You make it as a statement. It's not a plea. Only that which is in my greatest. It's a statement. This is your world, and you are in control of it. That's the statement, right? It's just a fact. And if you are trying to fake that, then you're going to struggle, right? If you do not see that as an empowered statement, you need to get up and stomp your foot and make it so. Only that which is in my greatest good is going to happen for me here. If that's what it takes for you to make that statement accurate and valid for you, then that's what you do. That's where you want to be, right? So now I've got three job offers. Is it in my greatest good that I take one of the three jobs that's being offered to me? You know, yes or no? Yes. Okay. You can separate them out. Is it yes and no? Is San Francisco in my greatest good? Or San Diego, sorry? Yes. That doesn't mean there's problem two that most people have. They run into a yes and they think because they're coming from a should-based world that the yes means that the other two are no. Remember that there are many ways for your soul to get what's in its greatest good, right? So let's say, is it in my greatest good to be in San Diego for a job? Yes. Is it in my greatest good to be in New York City for a job? Yes. Is it in my greatest good to be in Miami for a job? No. And don't forget, at this time. So I didn't do that, but you want to. Is it in my greatest good to take this job in San Diego at this time? Yes. Is it in my greatest good to take this job in New York City at this time? Yes. Is it in my greatest good to take this job in Miami at this time? No. Okay. Miami is, according to my higher self and what my soul is best interested in, a no. Now, I can still choose Miami because we have free will choice. We can do whatever we want. You should know that you're going to be paddling upstream in some form there, right? And that's a free will choice that you can make. You might use this tool to discern, why isn't that in your greatest good, right? But we're not going to get into that right now. Now we're going to go back to just San Diego and New York, right? Both are resonating as in our greatest good. That's the answers that we've gotten. So now we've got two hands, San Diego, New York City. Is one of these more serving of my greatest good than another? Yes and no. Maybe I'll change the way that works. Is it in my greatest good? Weight the hand, and I'll just say, weight the hand that has the strongest greatest good for my life path, San Diego or New York City? Got nothing. So what that tells you is that it's probably that both of them are actually equal in how they're going to serve your greatest good. Are you trying to tell me that they are both going to serve my greatest good equally? Yes. Okay. See, now for me, my left hand is always my yes. So I don't have to keep going yes and no, but you can, especially if you're training your system, you know, so yes or no. Are you trying to tell me that it's actually that both these were going to serve my greatest good this equally well? Yes. Okay. So now what do I do? Now I'm in the same boat as when I started, you know, thinking that these are my two choices and I don't know what it is. Well, are there other jobs out there that are in my greatest good that are reasonably soon? Okay. Reasonably soon. One of those words I hear in sessions all the time that the other side always makes you qualify is a partner coming into my life soon. Am I going to get out of debt soon? Am I going to be healthy for a while? These vague terms of time. And the other side will always say to you, define soon. Define a while. Am I going to live a long time? Define long. Right? So when you use vague terminology like time, you want to say at this time or in the next 3 months, or you could say in my lifetime. Is it ever going to be in this lifetime? If you say, is it ever going to be in my greatest good to live in San Francisco? Ever is going to be way past your physical lifetime right now. You're not working in linear time frame. You're not working in singular life. You're working in universal constructs. So in this lifetime, is it going to be in my greatest good to live in San Francisco at any point? Yes. Is it required of me? No. Okay. Then I don't have to live there, right? And that is it required. That required component means is it required for your soul path that it be that way? You're going to almost always get a no for that. I ask anyway. Right? Because sometimes that's my limiting place. So back to our two things. Now we think we're stuck. Don't forget there are other options. Are there other jobs out there, you know, that are going to come up in the next 3 months that are equally in my greatest good to take? Yes or no? And, you know, you might get a yes. So I don't have COVID in case any of you are seeing me cough. I'm like having a miniature meltdown over there. I have allergies that drain in my throat and just make my throat a mess. So, and I just don't want to blow your eardrum out, so I mute myself when I cough. So maybe, you know, there's a yes. Is it in my greatest good to wait for one of those jobs? No. Is it okay to wait for one of those jobs? Yes. So I'm back to having, you know, some free will choice around that. So in our example here, you can, let's say you've narrowed it down. Maybe there aren't any other options, or maybe you don't want to wait 3 months, right? It's in your greatest good to take the job in San Diego, and it's equally in your greatest good to take the job in New York City. So if they both serve your greatest good, they're going to serve it equally well, according to the other side. We checked for that. But there's no way they're going to be identical, right? You're going to have different climates. You've got different cultures. The cities function differently. Maybe they pay a little bit differently. Maybe the cost of living is a little bit different. So this is where you can use this tool to start nailing down some details. The most important thing that you're generally after is, you know, probably trying to work within what's going to serve your soul's greatest good, right? You might really want one of these two jobs, but maybe you found out that neither of them are actually in your greatest good. And you remember that you have free will choice, but you've decided that you don't want to take a job that's actually not going to be in your greatest good, you know, so that's the end of it. But in this case, we're going to nail down the detailed differences, because if they're both going to serve us equally well and our soul path is going to get to check mark what it needs there, well, then I'm going to pick and choose some stuff for what I want, right? And I want to know maybe how that's going to go. So I might say things like, maybe my concerns are financial. And I might say things like, remember, we roll. Sometimes if you've asked a couple of questions, you'll get tight and not realize it. So just roll your shoulders around. And you might say, am I going to have more, like, better quality socializations in San Diego or New York City? And maybe I got San Diego. Okay. Will I have quality socializations faster in San Diego or New York City? You know, and figure out. So think of the things that matter to you, that make for you, right? We already know what's going to serve the greatest good. But there's more to your experience than just check marking the boxes, right? And this is where you get to kind of discern for things that you want. Both jobs, let's say we did they're both going to be equally financially secure. We're going to not struggle more financially in one place than the other, right? Maybe we're going to be fine in both climates, but maybe what matters to us is I want to make some friends, you know? And technically, you can probably make friends anywhere. You know, am I going to make friends in San Diego or New York City? You get nothing. Probably because you're going to make them in both. Am I going to make friends in either city? Yes. You know, so okay. Do I want them to be shallow friends or do I want them to be quality friendships? Think about the details of what you actually are after, that you think matter to you, that feel like they matter to you, right? But you don't want to get into those questions typically until you've narrowed down what actually is serving your greatest good. Unless you don't care at all about what's in your greatest good, and then you can just jump right into the superfluous questions, you know. But that's the process. So if one of you has a thing that you're wanting to check out right now, like, here's my example that I want to ask, you know, then throw it up, you know, put your hand up in the app so that I can call on you and you can ask me, you know, what your question is, and we'll work through that as far as the process goes. While you're thinking about that question, let me look and see what was happening. Oh, there was a whole lot of comments about it freezing. Yep, I didn't know that. Thanks for letting me know. Let's see here. Okay, no questions in any of that. None of you have any questions around how to ask a question for something. So Sandra is saying, sounds like SMART goals to me. I'm not sure exactly what, you have SMART capitalized, so I don't know if that's a type of thing. I was supposed to have knee surgery and now I cannot. Okay, so are you wanting to know if it's in your greatest good to have knee surgery, right? So the question, if you're going to do that, around that would be, you know, only that which is, you know, in my greatest good is going to happen for me here. And, you know, if it were me, I would start out with, you know, yes and no. Does my knee require surgery to be healthy and well? Yes. Okay, well, then there I am, right? Like there's no like, do I take alternative methods, or is the surgery that is being recommended for my knee at this point the best option for my greatest good? Yes. Okay. Are there other options for knee surgery that might serve my knee well? No. Okay. Is it critical or important that I have that knee surgery in the next month? No. Okay. Can I still work in my greatest good if my knee surgery is 2 months from now? Yes. Okay. Can I still be in my greatest good if my knee surgery is 3 months from now? No. Okay. So now I know my knee surgery needs to be in the second month, right? I know that that's what's needed. That's what the other side is saying anyway, is needed for that. If you're deeply afraid of having surgery, right? So here's an attachment to, you know, to an answer that is going to be really common for all of us. Do I have cancer? You know, am I going to recover? Okay, like I want to have it. I don't want to have it. I don't want to pay for it. I don't want the recovery, whatever this might be. There's an attachment in you, an emotional response attachment. Only that which is in my greatest good is going to happen for me here, right? Do I have an attachment, that could get in the way here? Yes. Can we get that attachment out of the way for the purpose of asking these questions? Yes. Okay. So I'm stating that I am more interested in what the actual answer is than my attachment to what that answer is. So is it in my greatest good that I have this knee surgery? And then you can kind of work from there. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you were asking around that process, but if not, certainly, you can raise your hand, or maybe I might catch it in the chat here. Hannah is asking, do you suggest practicing the basics until you get the feeling of weight down before moving into specifics? I wouldn't recommend that anybody be asking. I mean, I wouldn't prevent you from doing it, right? Like, I don't make the rules. It's your life. You can do whatever it is that you want. But as far as a tool goes, if you're trying to use this as a divination tool, which is what the whole reason we're teaching you for that, is so that you can get answers outside of your brain, right? From your higher self, your guides, whatever that is. If you are not clear in how that works, then you might be confused in the way that you're getting answers, so you might not have enough sensation. Sometimes if you're not getting anything, this brings up a good point here too. Sometimes we'll say, only that which is in my greatest good is going to happen for me here. And then we'll start asking our questions. We're getting nothing, right? Nothing. Ask, is it in my greatest good to be asking these questions at this time? No. Okay. So now I have to just go, do whatever it is I was going to do anyway. Can I come back tomorrow and ask questions? Could it possibly be in my greatest good to ask questions tomorrow? No. They're not going to say no. They can't speak truthfully about the future. They can speak in percentages and probabilities. So, if the question is it going to be in my greatest good tomorrow? You're going to get nothing, or you're going to get this, right? But could it be in my greatest good to come back and ask questions tomorrow? Yep. You almost always get a yeah for that. There's probabilities to things, but when you're just dealing with like a yes or a no, or a San Diego and a New York, it's going to be more challenged to deal with percentages, unless you do things like, am I more than 50% likely to be able to get answers tomorrow? Yes. Okay. Am I more than 60% likely? Yes. Am I more than 70% likely? No. Okay. I'm between 60 and 70% likely that it's going to be in my greatest good to ask these questions tomorrow. And then still free will choice around that, whether you want to do that or not. So I would recommend that you get comfortable with the practice, but sometimes getting comfortable with it is asking real life questions, not false things. But so there's no issue. I wouldn't say that there's any issue with actually using it to ask real questions. I think it's an excellent tool for learning how it kind of divines in your system and helps you learn how to language. Again, I would remind you to write your questions out and record yourself. So like maybe you're not writing your questions out ahead of time, but hit the record button on your phone, ask your questions out loud, and then, maybe record your answers briefly, but then go back and listen to your recording. Now that you've got a minute, because maybe you're better at asking questions in flow, right? Or you think you are anyway. Go back and listen to what you asked, and how could I rephrase that? And then go back and ask those questions in their new rephrased, more balanced way, and see how clear your answers are, or if you get different answers. All right, the clarity of the question is crucial. Are you starting in the right place? Those sorts of things. But asking those questions is not an issue. Making major life decisions off of a divination tool that maybe you're not super solid with, I mean, you're welcome to do it. That's the beauty of the human experience with free will choice. I don't know that I would personally recommend that. I think that the more you practice with something and the more fluid it gets for you, the better you're going to be with that. But practice, no better practice than real life questions. So good question, though. So, and remember, there are no rules. You make up your own rules. I'm giving you a tool, or I'm sharing with you a tool that the other side shared with me, and you can use it. You all have free will choice. You can be completely unethical. You can get information that maybe is technically none of your business, but falls technically into the neutral category. You know, there's no rule, but there are consequences in life for every single thing that we choose. Some of them we like, and some of them we won't. And you know, if you work outside of ethics, or if you're making decisions out of places that are not clear, or from places that are egotistical in some form, like you're providing opportunities for the universe to say, oh, this is a good place to learn this lesson here, you know. So just keep those things in mind, that it's a great tool and it's a beautiful thing, and you got to keep it in balance. Can I use a picture in my mind's eye of my right or my left hand for the answer instead of wait? So Sherry is asking, can I use a picture in my mind's eye of my right or my left hand to answer the wait? No, you cannot, because you're going to get in your brain, right? That's where you want to stay out of. The only thing in your brain is the question. The answer needs to not be in there, right? They need to put a pressure on your body, or a weight in your hand, or a pressure on the top of each foot, or you could even say, you know, make one foot hotter than the other. Hot or cold is harder to determine in the system, especially efficiently and with clarity, than weight. Hot and cold run on the same line in the body, which is why sometimes some people feel something hot and some people feel it cold, especially when it comes to energy. So pressure or weight is a better way to do it, and you want to stay out of the mind's eye with it. So I wouldn't recommend it. Is it technically possible? Sure, but it's out of the scope of the tool that we're dealing with for that. So that would be my best answer for that. All right, so if nobody else has any questions, we're going to give it here just another minute. I'm going to recap a couple of things. You are very welcome, Sherry, and you're welcome, Sandra, too. Those are all good questions. Keep in mind, it's a tool, right? It's a divination tool. If you go back and look at the resonance class from last week, you'll learn a similar process in a different kind of application. And I think you can look at these things and work with them in ways that putting tool A and tool B together can be really helpful for you figuring out what's resonant for you, but also getting outside of your body into a tool here. And you know, it doesn't always have to be super obvious. One of the things that I always love to remind people is that energetic practices don't need to be something obvious. You don't need to make a spectacle of yourself. You don't need to show off. It's not required. It's you know, it's not necessary. And so you don't have to, you know, sit on the bus to work and do this, right? You can, you know, you can make it something less obvious, or you can duck into the bathroom. Like if you don't have to ask that question right now on the bus, you know, and you can, it's fine to ask it later, then ask it later someplace where you feel like you have the freedom to be relaxed and to not be, you know, if it makes you uncomfortable for other people to see what you're doing, that's not completely understandable, and you just don't have to do it there. Sometimes there's no option, you know, at least from your perspective. So keep in mind that the objective is for you to get additional pieces of information, not new rules, right? You're trying to figure out what best serves the soul's greatest good, right? And then add that to your other pieces of information, like what you think you want, and what you believe, you know, you want, and then what you actually want or fear, you know, and what's resonant. So there's a couple more questions that have popped in here. Christina is asking, are you saying that the mind's eye is in the brain? Well, the term mind is physiological in its nature. And most people deal with the mind's eye kind of as a pineal gland component. And so they see it in here. Really, I mean, from a universal standpoint, it doesn't really work that way, but that's more complicated than most people really need to be dealing with. And so putting it in their mind's eye puts it in their brain, which is what most people do. They put it in their brain. Their mind's eye is in their brain. And that's an issue for this tool, right? If you have enough capacity and clarity to pick up the clarity of that information in and translate it in your brain. I mean, really what the mind's eye is that your brain translates input. It's a computer. It's built as an input and an output, you know, like a two-way radio. And, you know, we say we hear our guides. We don't hear them at all. They don't have mouths. They're not making sounds in the vibratory range that your eardrum can pick up. What happens is you're picking up information, input, and it's getting processed in the brain, in the same part of the brain that would process for understanding that hearing would, right? So we'll say, because it's just a confusion on our part, in our language. We have no other piece of word for it, you know, unless we're saying we're intuiting. But we'll say, you know, oh, my guide said this, you know, and it's the most common terminology. It really doesn't have anything. They didn't say anything. So when you get in the mind's eye, if you are truly able to pick up things in the mind's eye with genuine clarity and stay out of the way, which is much more challenging, then you wouldn't really be using this tool for the most part anyway. Like I said, I mean, I still use it sometimes just because I want to make sure I'm out of the way, but yeah, stay out of the brain for this particular tool. Am I telling you to stay out of the brain for all things? Absolutely not, you know, like definitely not. But for this tool, I would stay out of the brain, and I would stay out of the concept of the mind's eye, because what you imagine, you create. And your mind is going to have a tendency to imagine what it might fear or what it might want. We're trying to get your mind out of the way here. So we're trying to get it out here, right? It's not even in the body. It's on the body, a weight in a hand. So yeah, I would try to stay away from mind's eye and brain stuff with this. Carrie, I answered all of her questions without asking. That's awesome. That's great. And Hannah is saying, this may be a bold question, but do you believe psychedelics can be used to get in touch with the sensations like intuition or empathy that are outside of our five senses and intellect? Absolutely, without a doubt. I also think that psychedelics can cause pretty significant, you know, like mental breakdowns, psychotic breaks. There is definitely a place for psychedelics in the world, and in the right construct, in the right use, monumentally helpful. But sometimes that right use is a Saturday night party for some people, and sometimes it's therapeutic setting. And usually by the time you realize that it's not the right place for your awareness, it's too late. And I will tell you that I work with a fair number of people every year who are still struggling with the after effects of inappropriate psychedelic use, or more often than not, inappropriate guidance around psychedelic use. So psychedelics can open up pathways in the brain that are congested or clogged. They help. Think of it like you've got a bunch of wires in your computer, but these two wires aren't connected, right? Or they're atrophied. And psychedelics can shift that. In the same way that when you're on psychedelics, some people will see sound and hear color, right? Think of it like things getting crossed in the brain. It's a different way of processing. And there's been plenty of studies out of Johns Hopkins where you can look at the MRI cross sections of the brain of people. You know, they've established a baseline with these people pre-psychedelic use, and then they do 4 or 5 cross sections MRIs of the brain while they're on psychedelics, and then they do cross sections one day later, 1 week later, and 5 months later, and how much of that still stays open. There's not enough science, you know, for that for most people these days. But while psychedelics can open up pathways, they can open up problems, you know, and it's important if someone's going to use psychedelics that they, even if they don't suspect that it could be a problem for them, that they know what their go-to is going to be if they come out of that psychedelic experience troubled, challenged. You know, I've got a therapist I can go to, or I can join this group, or there's this help group, you know, around these things, or I can go get this work done, or, you know, there's some plan B in case it all doesn't go exactly as, you know, as planned, which is why psychedelics are being looked at as being legalized for therapeutic use in a therapeutic setting, and not necessarily always being looked at as being legalized for whatever use. But the goal is really that you be able to access whatever pathways those open without the use of the psychedelics, if it's in your greatest good. Sometimes what's in your greatest good is that you have this one incredibly monumental ayahuasca experience or mushroom trip or LSD trip, and you're not really meant to have another one. You spend the rest of your life functioning from that newfound perspective or working with that wiring, that sort of stuff. So I think what happens though is that people feel so victimized and suppressed in this particular world that they find a great freedom and a great sense of themselves and the big picture in psychedelic experiences. And so all they want to do is escape this life into that one. And it's completely understandable, but kind of defeats the purpose of being here. So if escape is what you're doing with that. So I would just encourage people to, to be very careful with their psychedelic use, and make sure that they have some options for aftercare or decompression. There are certainly therapists out there who work with that sort of thing. And for anybody that might be watching this and having issues or might have issues in the future, I'd strongly encourage you to look into MAPS, M-A-P-S. MAPS is I know it's nationwide, I think it's worldwide, organization around the use of psychedelics in mostly therapeutic settings, but there's a lot of information available through them. They're very well known, and they are a resource if you or someone might need some help around or want to get access to studies and that sort of thing. There's a lot of information there. MAPS. And you should be able to find that on Google, no problem. So hopefully that answered your question. Maybe a little bit long-winded, but psychedelics are not a short answer usually. So let's see, what else do we have here? Ray is asking, I receive a loud ringing in my ear at times, and I feel like it's a guide talking or answering me. Is this correct to think? Ray, that would really be a reading-based question. I don't want to get into your own personal experiences in a public forum. That doesn't feel ethical. What I can tell you is that definitely some people perceive ringing in their ears when there's a vibrational change. If your guides are actually really trying to talk to you, though, you're probably going to pick that up on some form. The ear is highly sensitive to vibrations and pressure changes both, and energy can change pressure sensations in the ear too. So there's a number of things that it could be there, and I don't want to automatically say that you or for anybody else that would be a truthful statement. And I would caution anybody that if you feel like your guides are talking to you and you're not getting it, that you don't start self-judging yourself or becoming neurotic about like, they're trying to tell me something. Trust me, if they really want you to know something, you're going to know it one way or the other. If they can't get it through to your conscious mind in the normal format, it's going to be painted on the side of a bus that drives past you, or some complete stranger is going to walk up to you and say the strangest thing, in the grocery line, or they're going to make sure right? If you are meant to know it consciously, they're going to make sure you know it one way or the other. So just make sure you don't stress out about those things either. Suze is asking, hi, where on your body do you place oils? That's really not a tool question for what's going on in tonight's class. If you're talking about the high-powered oils, I'll tell you that there is no particular place, to do those. That's a really personal preference for that. So let's see. And then Heather S. is saying, thank you, Ray, for that ear ringing question. I get the same thing. Yeah, that's pretty common. I get it too. I don't get it often, but I do get it. I also, in addition to that, sometimes I'll get a different, like a pressure change in one ear or the other, particularly if there's an energetic shift going on too. It's not always really that someone's trying to talk to you though. It's an energy shift usually. But good questions all around intuition stuff for sure. Kimberly's asking, is this tool limited to showing us what's specifically in our own greatest good? This is a great question. Or can we use it to also identify if certain choices or behaviors of ours will be in another's greatest good? If certain choices or behaviors of ours will be in another's greatest good. I'm not sure if that's clear, but I'm trying to ask if my behavior could be in my greatest good, but not for someone else involved or impacted by the choice. Yeah, absolutely. So we do things all the time that are in our greatest good, but maybe not someone else's, or maybe they're doing things that are actually serving their greatest good, but not yours. That's to be expected. Everything is going to be in the greatest good. Whenever you're working in your greatest good or someone else is working in their greatest good, it's going to be in the greatest good, because benefiting the whole, like benefiting the self, is always going to benefit the whole. But that doesn't mean that what I'm doing in my greatest good actually needs to be in your particular life. So it might not be in your greatest good. So you can ask those questions like, is moving, let's go back to our same example. Let's say we kind of defined it down to, okay, we're going to go to San Diego. So, San Diego is in my greatest good. Yes. And it's going to serve my soul path well. Yes. Is going to San Diego in my partner's greatest good? No. Shit. So now what? Okay, well, don't forget the opposite end of that. Is it against their greatest good to go to San Diego? No. Okay, so technically it's neutral. It's not in their greatest good. It's not against their greatest good. And you can define those things down. And you can say like, okay, I don't want to leave my partner, right? San Diego is in my greatest good, but I don't want to leave my partner, and it's not in their greatest good. Let's say, it just definitively wasn't in their greatest good. This is a beautiful example of free will choice, right? I can choose to do something that's not in my greatest good for the benefit of others. If you do that more often than not, then you are operating not in authenticity for your own greatest good. You're out of balance, which is where most people are operating, right? Because we live in a culture that teaches codependency and that you're responsible for everybody else's behavior and not your own. Not your own sense of wellness and being, but everybody else's wellness and being. So we do all these things that, the culture told us we should do because that's easier for other people. That's good for other people, or it's what they think is good for them, or we were told was good for them. But, you can apply the same kind of issues to what's in the greatest good. But the bottom line is it's a tool for understanding what serves your soul. You still have free will choice to determine whether or not what your free will choice is going to be with that additional information. So yes, you can ask, is it in someone else's greatest good for me to help them? It gets a little bit trickier because you're not only dealing with the answers that would be truthful for them, but also whether it's actually in your greatest good to know these details. Sometimes it's just shockingly surprising how much information the other side will give you about another person, right? And their life path. You'd be like, wow, that's very detailed. And other times, it's actually not. And you'll think, well, I'm not going to judge them, right? Why can I not know this? And the reality is that apparently knowing something, every time we know something or think we know something, it affects us. Every time we have an interaction with someone that we love, phone call, run into them in person, it never stays the same. The relationship never stays the same. Nothing stays the same. Everything is always changing. So that interaction that we just had made us love them more or love them less or reiterated our current stance, which is still a change, right? It's a new piece of information making this more solid. So as much as we don't want to think that it would affect us, and we're sure logically and intellectually, well, having that information is needed, or I need to know, or it's not a problem, might not actually be the case, so you might not be getting answers for other people simply because getting the answer is problematic in itself for how it affects you. But you can ask. I'm a big fan of asking. What's the worst they're going to say? Nothing. Get nothing. Is it in my greatest good to be asking these questions? No? Oh. Will you answer them anyway? No? Okay. You might get a yes. Ask. Always ask. But I will tell you, you got to understand your language when you're asking about other people. It gets even trickier. So just be very cognizant of your language around those. But that's a good question because we do care about other people, and we want to ask. If what we're doing is going to affect them negatively, we want to know that sometimes. So. Negatively being used in this term as like not serving their greatest good rather than whether they like it or not. So real quick, a couple more questions and then we're going to wrap this up. Is this tool limited to showing us what's this? Oh, we already did that one. Sorry about that. And thank you for that question. Trista is asking, this process seems like it can really highlight one's challenge with asking for what they want or feeling like they can have what they want. What would you say to someone who wants clarity but is having an issue feeling like they can ask for it? Totally different things. This is not about you asking for what you want. You're not asking the other side to give you what you want. That's not what this is. This is about you figuring out what is in your soul's greatest good, right? But if you are struggling with the concept that you are not allowed to want anything other than what is in your soul's greatest good, then you're having a valuing understanding problem. And that wouldn't be really that surprising, especially because we keep coming back to this, but the culture is, just rampant with what you want doesn't matter. What makes you feel good doesn't matter, right? You got to do the right thing. You got to do the thing the church said, your parents said, your culture said, the things that people accept now, right? It's always about what's comfortable for other people, or, what keeps you in line according to what they think you should be doing. Like, that's what's been taught, right? So we're taught that it's not okay to want something. The culture kind of teaches that. And that, and then sometimes our trauma teaches us that too. We wanted something and we got disappointed, and so our safety mechanism will say it's not safe to want something, right? So acknowledge that in the process, right? Like, is it okay for me to want something else? Yes. Do I have permission to want something else? Yes. Do I have permission to choose something else? Yes. Like, you can get a sense of validation and permission through just asking, right? It's if you're struggling with, well, if this is what's in my greatest good, then it's what I should do, then you definitively need to be working at like your languaging and your concepts of where you get your value from. And I would strongly encourage you to work with the resonance tool too. If you're an empath, I would strongly recommend you put a filter on your field, because if you're really struggling with should components and outside influence is having that much of an impact on you, you want to cut down that level of outside influence as much as you can in whatever way it's not necessary. And then another thing you can do is you can kind of write it out on paper, and you can say things like, if there were no consequences, what would I want? So you can qualify it, and that gives yourself an opportunity to sort of step more into what it is you want without feeling like there's going to be consequences, and then work through that. So the tool can actually help you figure out, if you're using with the right questions, where your hurdles are, right? But you've got to ask the right questions. So practicing with that tool, and you can keep track of it. You can keep a journal, like, here's the pages that I'm working on my self-worth issues around, and I'm getting some clarity around those. And maybe it'll stop at a certain point, because you need to work with those things till you can get more clarity around those. But this tool is pretty limitless. You can dig into yourself in all kinds of ways. You can help the other side dig into yourself. But again, I would really recommend too, if you're doing a lot of self-analysis and digging into your own rewiring, using this tool in some of the ways that it really can be used, that just like a psychedelic experience, you have a support structure, at least in mind. I can go see this therapist, or I can call my friend, or I can go do this therapy, so that, because digging into ourselves is sometimes brutal and harsh. You've been living, not you in particular, but people have been living a long time, like with blinders on, intentionally so, because that's what they're supposed to do. And that's what the culture told them they were supposed to do. And so you start digging into what's been going on with you and what your hurdles are. It can be painful, and your traumas can come up. So always have some, support structures around that too. But the tool will really help you get through those things. There is no magic wand in this tool for getting you to be okay with what you want, but it can certainly, the tool itself can actually help you figure out why you struggle with that, and if some various tools are serving your greatest good to use or not around that. So, but that's a really good question, because that's a really big struggle with people, is that it's not okay to want something. Last question here. So Heather S. is asking, is this tool different than muscle testing or similar? Entirely different. Again, muscle testing is, muscle testing is about getting your body to respond. And usually that's a practitioner that's doing that on you. But, you can do your own muscle testing if you can stay out of the way enough, but a lot like a pendulum, that's a real challenge. So muscle testing is often something that has variable actual accuracy to it, because you're using your body, the muscles in your body, it's in your body, right? So whether you're putting your arm out and you're testing resistance, this is a body-to-body test. What this tool that we're teaching tonight doesn't have anything to do with your body, except they're putting a weight on your body. It's not coming through your body, right? So they are very different things. They might look similar, but they are very different things. So excellent questions. That is everything. Looks like everybody's questions have been answered. I really appreciate all of you for, coming to these classes and looking to grow yourself. These are challenging things. Some of these tools can be fabulous, and they can bring up more things to work on too. So, again, make sure you are keeping in mind where your support structures are and that you have access to those. And, it might just be a walk in the woods is a good support structure for you, or maybe you might need to be looking at outside practitioners, facilitators, therapists, that sort of thing. But the ability to be clear is in you. You all have it. This tool is an empowering thing. Don't make it your new rule. Don't make it your new parent, right? The new thing you should do. It is helping you gain clarity. It is helping you gain strength. It's helping you get out of the way so you can get some big picture views. You're not just following some knee-jerk response of should. So there's a lot that can be done with this tool, and I encourage you to practice it and play with it. And I, encourage you to keep track of what kind of answers you got and watch over time to see how those play out for you, because the more you work with that, the more you'll understand how you're discerning that information too. So it's always a growth process. But I thank you all for tuning in and for bringing great questions and for being open to trying new things. For those of you that have been coming to a lot of these classes, I really appreciate it. There's been a lot of people reach out and say beautiful things about that, and that's been super nice. I love doing it. Keep your eye out in your email if you're on the mailing list for potential new classes that are coming up that would be released like next week or the week after that. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe and hit the little bell button next to it so that you can be notified every time a new class or a new lecture something goes online for free. And check out the website for any updates and new things that are going on at julienorth.com. Thanks, you guys. Have a great night.